last week on the Nicoletti Show. James, you're the man, and love seeing you, brother.
Our group is the center of excellence for collaboration in Tampa real estate. There is something really, really powerful when you get serious investors who are operating at a high level, who are willing to collaborate and help each other. When you create a room like that, the solution to your problem is usually 0 or 1 degrees away.
Deals get done when there's that person-to-person interaction. One thing I know that you are big on is leadership.
Make sure you're fostering an absolutely elite culture in your organization. If you can do that, the right A players will flock in and they want to be a part of it.
What have you noticed have been some good characteristics and some bad characteristics?
What I see happen is they consistently have to be integrated in the daily tasks of their business, and they're oftentimes coming in and like being the hero. You want to get yourself out of being the hero and feeling like you need to save the day as a leader, because if you're doing that, it's highly likely that you're not actually empowering their team to perform the best in line with their highest purpose.
Your ability to be able to form this community and form leaders from this is very impactful for everybody.
Elite contributors in your organization, they're the kind of people that want coaching, feedback, guidance, accountability, clear expectations. As a leader, you are in the business of people. And so you have an obligation to provide your people with that.
Thanks so much for coming on my show today.
Thanks, Al. I'm honored.
What an episode that was last week. If you missed any of that, go back, check that episode out, rewind it. So much to unpack in every episode on the show. And of course, you can find all the content on the Nicoletti Show. Scan the QR code at the top of the screen. You'll find everything on our link tree and everything from YouTube, Instagram, Facebook, iTunes, Spotify, you name it, on all the social media platforms. You can check everything out on the show there. And of course, all the content on probate. Of course, we're going to have probate content on there. Quiet title, partitions, all the messy stuff. Tons to digest on the social media channels. Check that out. And tonight, we are going to have a masterclass with Steve Trang. Everybody knows Steve Trang. Real Estate Disruptors. They go hand in hand. Like, you see this guy, his podcast, the people he's had on his show, and he's killing it in the sales game. And I'm excited to have him on, and we are going to learn a lot about sales, and building a successful sales team is everything in your business. So I'm ready. I got my pen, I got my notepad, and as I always say, please feel free to engage. Ask your questions, like, comment, ask away, because that's when you're going to learn the most. If you're listening, whether you're watching, listening, whatever it is, ask a question. That's what this is about. We all want to learn together. So I'm ready. Let's rock this thing. Hey, everybody. My name is Al Nicoletti. I'm an attorney here in Florida, and welcome to the Al Nicoletti Show, where I bring on real estate super investors, rising rock stars, movers and shakers, and leaders of clubs in their communities that educate, entertain, and inspire all things on Florida real estate and beyond. Not just in our market in Florida, but other states, other industries, other different types of real estate areas, Airbnbs, short-term rentals, commercial, zone, land, everything. And you can find so many of these content pieces on our show on how you can take your company to the next level. On our show today, we are going to have a full-on masterclass with sales. We all want to learn about this because it's not just about real estate and business, but the sales component is one of the most important of them all. And bringing on somebody that can really share their skills, their knowledge, their resources is just amazing. And Steve Trang is that guy. So Steve, he did a presentation masterclass in the Family Mastermind on one of the Zooms. I was honored to host one of those Zooms. I had no idea what to expect. I didn't know what Steve was going to go over. I just knew he was going to talk about how to build a successful sales team. By the end of it, I was mind blown. And it was so amazing. I told Steve, I said, I really want you to share this with the audience. And I'm so excited to have Steve talk about this. So without further ado, let's welcome Steve Trang to the show. Steve, there you are, man. Let's get it.
Man, there's so much energy, so much excitement. My heart is beating, right? Nearly out of his chest. The amount of energy here on the podcast is just incredible.
Steve, it's great to see you. And I love that you know all about sales and that you're able to share this kind of information with our audience and dive in. Steve, before we dive in, just a little bit about your journey. how you got into this game and where you are now.
Yeah, I mean, I think like many people, you go through college, get the good grades, get the good job, right? And you get in the corporate world, and then you realize this is not for me. This is not it. So again, the real estate, right? So I do real estate. This bought my first property in '05. Started became a realtor in '07. Started wholesaling in 2011. Wholesaling after that. So done a lot in real estate. But the thing that's maybe interesting for some people is that I was horrendous at sales because I was an engineer, and being an engineer, not naturally, right? It doesn't go. It's not peanut butter and jelly. It's really more like oil and water, right? And so I really struggled a long time for sales. But then I eventually figured that out, right? Through the courses, the coaching, signing up, getting professional help from people that, really can teach it really well. But even though I got better at sales, I didn't realize that you have to also lead salespeople effectively. And that's what we're going to be talking about today. But man, let me tell you how much I sucked in that arena, getting salespeople to do the work that they said they wanted to do.
Yeah.
It's a long, painful journey.
I'm sure it's got to be a long journey. Steve,
Yeah.
let's dive in because I know we're all dying to know this. For some of the first building blocks, building a successful sales team, where does this all begin? How do you even start with making sure you can build this team from the ground up?
Yeah. So I think one of the first things is if you look around, right, where most of the best operators, because there's a lot of really successful people in the real estate industry, right? Like I happen to be, I'm in Family Mastermind with you. I'm also in Collective Genius. I'm in Boardroom. I'm in all these other masterminds as well. And the thing you see, like the biggest, most successful people, whether it's Eric Brewer, Phil Green, Michael Smith, like you look around, the things they have in common is they have the best sales team. And why is that so important, right? Well, when we first got started in real estate, it was like, how do I find that first seller? How do I find someone that will talk to me, right? It's really hard, intimidating at first. And you watch some podcasts, you watch some YouTube videos, you buy a course, you eventually start figuring it out, right? And there's a plethora of service providers inside a Family Mastermind that will show you exactly where to get these leads. And so in 2011, if you could get in front of a homeowner, you basically got the deal because there wasn't really much competition. In 2025, we're all pretty much fishing from the same barrel, right? And so then how do you compete if we're all going out the same data? So number one is to get really good at sales, which works as a smaller operator. But as you get bigger, it's not who's the best at sales, it's who's got the best sales team. And leveling up a sales team, that is what separates the biggest and the baddest from everybody else. For better or for worse, it's the richer get richer. Right? Those that have the best sales team have more money for marketing to get more leads to feed their sales team. Right? It's this cycle. So that's the first thing you got to understand. First, you got to get a good marketing. Then you got to get good at sales, and then after all that, you got to get at leading a sales team. And one of the biggest things about leading a sales team is you don't just decide I'm going to build a sales team. I mean, you can make that decision, but it's not going to work. I've tried that. What you got to do is you actually have to be the best version of yourself. And we're all in personal development. You wouldn't be listening to a podcast if you didn't care about personal development. So you have to be interested in personal development. But then after getting interested in personal development, there's all sorts of different types of personal development. And so, we had the great pleasure of hanging out with John Maxwell at Family Mastermind.
Yep.
And he is the guy when you talk about leadership. If you want to get better at leadership, there's nobody more qualified than John Maxwell to talk about leadership. And so with going and learning from John, there were one of my favorite books was Good Leaders Ask Great Questions, right? And in that book, there was 3 questions that you have to be able to answer. Hopefully I can remember off the top of my head. First one is, do you care for me? Right? Like, do you actually care about me? Do you actually want what's best for me? When I'm not in the room, are you actually fighting for me? Right? So first one is, do you care about me? Second one is, can you help me? Can you actually help me accomplish my goals? Because that's one of the biggest things, right? Like, talented people don't want to work at a place where there's no path for success, right? If I work for Al, I'm I like to think I'm a talented person. If I work for Al and after like 2 months I see that he cannot help me grow any further, I'm sorry, I like you, but I'm going somewhere else, right? So can you actually help me accomplish my goals? And then the third one is, can I trust you, right? Like, can I trust you to give you my best effort? Can I trust that you're gonna actually um, do what you said you're gonna do? Are you committed to the mission, or you're like Enron, where you say like integrity is a core value, but it's just on the wall, right? So I think that's one of the biggest things is, can I trust? Do you care about me? Can you help me? Can I trust you? So I think that's one of the biggest things about leadership. But going back to my own story, I became a realtor in '07. I started leading other people at the brokerage. It wasn't my brokerage, at the brokerage. And in 2013, I went off on my own to start my own brokerage, and I built out a bigger team there. And what was going on over and over again was I was just cycling through salespeople, right? They come in, some would work, someone wouldn't work, and then they cycle out. And then you know how it goes in real estate. They go out to compete against you, and you get a little bitter, you get a little upset. That's kind of how it works, right? That's just the price you pay for being in the real estate game. Um, and then the same thing, right? I started my wholesaling company. In 2018 was when I went like full bore into wholesaling, and then we bring in all these young kids, these young guns, want to hustle, learn how to wholesale, right? And the same thing, they come in, they work with you, and they go compete against you. And again, you get frustrated, right? But what you come to realize is, well, the reason why that's happening is because you're bringing in the wrong people, right? And then B, you don't know how to effectively lead and manage them. So first is, I was so proud early in my career of how many young people I brought in and had success with them. Right? I was so proud that I did have success with them. I was so proud of how many young people I brought in, because the great thing about having young single people is they were always available to show houses on weekends.
Mhm.
They're always available. There were no obligations, right? There weren't as many weddings, birthday parties, whatever, right? They would go show houses. That was the great thing about having young single people working for your team. The problem with having young single people on your team is that you're basically the parent. And so, more times than I would like to admit, I would say, hey, Al, make sure, when you go out tonight and tomorrow, like on a Friday, right? I would say, make sure when you go out tonight and tomorrow night, make sure you drink enough water before you go to bed, please.
It's crazy.
So that you're a functioning human being on Saturday, Sunday, and Monday. I had to do these things for a younger person because they didn't have the life skills yet to be able to deal with that, right? That was the first thing. Second thing, when they did have kids, when they got married, they had kids, they didn't know how to handle real world challenges when their kid's sick, right? It's a freaking crisis, because we all know with your first kid, you don't know what you're doing. Kid's sick, it's a crisis. You don't know how to deal with it. So we realized we want to hire some older people who actually know how to deal with problems. It's not an SOP, but there's a protocol when there's a sick kid, right? And then the third thing was their financial thermostat. So we're all familiar with a thermostat on the wall,
Mhm.
right? You set it for 75 degrees. If it gets to 77, AC turns on. If it gets down to 73, heater turns on, right? That's what a thermostat does. It determines what the temperature should be in your room. Not rocket science. There's also a financial thermostat, and the financial thermostat is when the if they decide that their self-worth is $100,000, then they will work hard to make $100,000. But the people that we were hiring, again, young, single, hustlers, their financial thermostat was 35,000 because their whole lives, that's all they've made. And so we would have these guys that would make 20,000 in a month, 40,000 by April. And the rest of the year, they weren't doing anything. They weren't working hard, because even though they told me they wanted to make 100,000, their financial thermostat was 40. So then again, as we got wiser, we hired people that had obligations, that had commitments. And this goes back to, like, if they're married, they got kids, 40,000 a year is not going to cut it, right?
Steve,
ahead.
let me ask you this. At what point did you realize this needs to change? That I know what I have, and what I have is it's great. You're making an impact to young people, and you're being that almost father figure in a way, which is not the role that you wanted to play. But what point did you realize I got to change this now, or this is not going to be a longevity game for me?
I would say it was joining masterminds and finding best practices. Right. So this wasn't like someone said to me, like I was aware of it. I was aware of the financial thermostat, but I didn't give myself permission to hire older people. Right. So like I was aware that this is happening, that I'm hiring young people and this isn't working. But I never gave myself permission to change who I'm going after as far as recruiting goes. Now, being in a mastermind was incredibly helpful. The other thing too is I'm a sales trainer, and one of the greatest blessings I've had in my life is I get to train the best house buyers across the country. Incredibly fortunate, right? I've got real-time data coming in all the time. And when I look at the Zoom screen, they look more like you and me than they look like they just graduated college. So there's more data when you look at the Zoom screen. It's like, oh, the best sales guys are actually older, that have life experience. Another thing too is like when I'm going to meet Betty to buy her home, right? Even higher 20s, lower 30s, I could speak to her intelligently about like, burying her husband and how she doesn't know where she's going to go. Man, 23, they're not really connecting with Betty about what she's going through.
Yeah. Yeah.
Right.
There's
so
a
like
difference.
life experience becomes a big factor. So, so like hiring the right people, I think that was a big thing. And then the other thing was, and I'll give credit, you're asking like part of this. So Ren Bartlett and I have done a lot of business together. Right. And so like at some point he built up his team. They had, I think like 100, they had 50 acquisition agents at their most. Right. So he's hired hundreds of salespeople. I've hired hundreds of salespeople, brainstorming, masterminding, and so on. The other thing too was what I didn't realize was, I don't know about you, I had all this stress whenever I had to have an accountability conversation, right? Like nothing gives me more stress than having to hold someone accountable, or at least that was the case. And so if I say, you told me when I recruited you, Al, you said you want to make 100,000 a year. Great. I hired you. I bought the leads, right? I got you in the CRM. I've given you everything you need to be successful. And then you're over here making $40 a week. And now I got to come over here. I was like, Al, what are you doing here? Why are you not making $40? Or why are you only doing $40 a week, right? And so I gave myself all this stress and anxiety because I didn't want to have this confrontational conversation. And this is me personally, but there's also the flip side of it. I've got a bunch of friends who are mavericks and just lose their mind. Like, Al, what the hell's going on? Why aren't you making the phones? Where are you? Why are you taking long lunches? Why aren't you following up the leads? And this and that, right? So there's two ways that this can go wrong. I was on the softer side. I got a lot of friends on the harder side. And so we learned eventually how to actually have an effective conversation, which is prior to actually putting you on the phones, is let's figure out what's important to Al. Well, Al says he wants to make six figures. Great. Everyone says that in the job interview for sales. I don't know what it is about six figures. I was that same person. I said, okay, great. What are you trying to do? Why are you working here? And he said, well, Steve, I want to make an impact. And for me personally, for me, my wife, my kids, I got to make 150,000 a year. 150,000 a year. Okay, great. For what? Well, our kids go to a private school. My wife, she drives a Lexus. I need a BMW, and we want to take an epic vacation at least once a year. Great. All right, so 150,000 covers all that. Yes. All right, fantastic. So to make 150,000 a year, right, we take the big goal and we quantify it. 150,000 a year. We know that, to make 150,000 a year, a little over 12,000 a month, right? So to make a little over 12,000 a month, we got to do about 120,000, rough numbers, in closed revenue per month. Nothing here, nothing earth-shattering math here, right? To do 120,000 revenue a month, if our average fee is about 15,000, that's 8 signed contracts, right? We got to have 8 closed contracts. So 8 closed contracts. To do 8 closed contracts, maybe we need 12 signed contracts, right? And again, I'm doing back of the napkin math here. 12 signed contracts. Okay, to do 12 signed contracts, how many appointments do we need to sit per week? 6, 8, 10? Let's just call it 10. All right, to do 10 appointments a week, how many conversations do you need to have every single day to hit 10 appointments per week? So we figure out that math. All right, so basically it works out 2.5 hours, maybe 3 hours of talk time every single day. So now I got something to work with, right? All right, Al. So for you to be able to put your kids in private school, get your wife the Lexus, you stay your BMW, you take your epic vacation once a year, we need to make 150 a year, which means we need to sign 12 contracts a month, which means we need to sit 10 appointments a week, which means we need 2.5, 3 hours of talk time every single day. Great. Can you commit to that? But these are all Al's numbers. There's not a single number here that came from Steve. Al says he wants these things. Al says he's willing to put in the work to do all these things. Now it's no longer, hey, Al, hey, why aren't you doing the work? Why is it only 40 dials? Because that 40 dials was like an indirect protest against my goals. Right? If I'm saying, Al, I need you to make this much money for me, 40 dials, like, yeah, whatever. Like, why do I need to make all this money for Steve? But it's all about making money for Al. Now he's willing to put in the work.
And Steve, you brought up a great point that really stuck with me after the masterclass about accountability. Yeah. And that was being able to have the difficult kind of conversations with the team.
Yep.
If they're not performing or they're not living up to those standards. And I remember that, I don't know if it was somebody that brought it up or maybe you had just brought it up to begin with, but how to have that conversation. And I remember you said something about have that at the front, like you just said, have it at the beginning and saying, if you're not performing the way that you need to, how do you want me to approach you? And I remember that because that is such a great way to being able to have those awkward conversations that don't need to be awkward, but they're accountability conversations.
Yeah.
Let's expand on that because you're in that category of accountability.
Yeah. So I think one of the things that's is so stressful is like, how do I do it? How do I approach him? You know, like for myself personally, I would walk up to their cubicle because that's what we used to have, right? So I walk up to the cubicle right behind them and take a deep breath. Hey, Al, right? Because it was so stressful for me to do it, right? But that's because I didn't know how to have this conversation. But now there's a really simple hack to having this conversation. Hey, Al, so, 2.5, 3 hours, that's what we came up with. That's what you've agreed to, that you're committed to, so that you can do all these things. Great. So sometime in the future, 30 days from today, or maybe 6 months from today, there's going to come a time where like, you're just not putting in the work you said you needed to put in. How would you like me to have that conversation with you? And it's always going to be like, let me know. It's like, okay, how would you like me to let you know? Like, well, just come to my office and let me know, or give me a phone call. Okay, great. So if you're not hitting the numbers, I'm going to call you, let you know, or you want me to stop by your desk and let you know you're not hitting your numbers. You're good with that. Like, yes. And the key here is that it was your idea, not mine. And the more it's your idea, the easier it is. The more it's my idea, the more resistance you get, right? The more resistance you're going to give me. So it's got to be your idea. Everything we do is got to be your idea. And this is true in sales. This is true in leadership. This is true in parenting, right? Everything. It's got to be your idea. So that's the reason why we ask the questions this way, so that you're not going to complain. Like, you're going to look to, I think Mike, right, is in the next room. He's like, Mike, can you believe Steve just called me out like that? I cannot believe he would embarrass me in front of everybody. Like, I'm doing what you asked me to do.
Right.
That's your idea.
Yeah. And I think that's a great segue into being able to have those conversations, and it's the accountability of that person.
Yeah.
How do you want us to approach you? What's the best way to communicate with you? And I think that just doesn't just apply to sales. I think that could apply to the business that you have, your assistants that you have, anybody, because situations are going to come up. And when you've been in this game as long as you have, Steve, and as long as I've had my business, you're going to see these scenarios come up and new people come in. And you don't want to repeat back through the same things that you went through before. So let's nip it at the bud. Let's figure these things out. Let's be proactive about it. And I love that strategy, because I just wanted you to know, like, that stuck with me ever since that family call about how to navigate through that, because it happens all the time. So this is gold. So keep rolling with this, because this is great.
Yeah. So we talked about like the talent, right? So they want to be held accountable. And like the other thing too is champions want to be held accountable. Like that's the thing, right? Like if I'm not doing a good job, I want you to call me out and I want you to guide me to get better. Like I was saying earlier, right? One of John Maxwell's questions is, can you help me? Right. And so part of that is we got to identify the right talent. So we talked about, the age, the financial thermostat, obligations, this and that, but also they got to be, alphas in a way. They got to be willing to accept feedback. We say A players, we say rock stars. I want you to think about right now, I think we're all familiar with who Kobe Bryant was, right? So Kobe Bryant in one hand, and then we're going to go James Harden in the other hand, right? Sorry if you guys are a James Harden fan. Okay, so it's halftime, right? You walk up to Kobe Bryant and you say, what the hell are you doing out there? Your guy is lighting you up. Are you just not going to, did you just not show up, decide not to show up to play today? What's going to happen to that poor guy on the other side? That guy is getting locked down, right? Not only is he going to get locked down, but Kobe is going to score on him and make him work on defense. Go to James Harden. James, what the hell are you doing out there? Your guy's lighting you up. You decide not to play today? He's going to pout and sulk the entire second half, and nothing's going to happen. My point here is you want to hire a bunch of Kobe Bryants, not a bunch of James Hardens. Again, sorry if you guys are a James Harden fan, right? I'm an ASU alum, right? I should be nicer to the guy, right? But, you look at him, Luka Doncic, right, who just got traded. You look at these guys who, like, some people will step up when challenged. Other people, not so much. You want to hire a bunch of people that will step up. Steve Jobs, right? He was one of the things he said was that his number one most important responsibility at Apple was bringing in and keeping great talent. It wasn't innovation. It wasn't fonts. It wasn't iPhones and tablets in the stores. Those things happened, and he was great. Apple did some incredible stuff. His number one responsibility was bringing in great talent and keeping them. Why? Because that man was a madman and he was a tyrant. He would berate you and undress you regularly and tell you how much your work sucked, right? But what he said was he could do that because he hired alphas. He didn't hire beta males. He hired people that want to be the best in the world at what they do. So he would go in there and tell them how much their stuff sucked. And what would that do? It would step up and make it better. So you want to hire a bunch of people that expect greatness. You want to build a culture where everyone wants to do well. I think one of the things that we see happen all the time is people say, I want to build great culture. I want to build a place where everyone is a killer, right? At least I think most people want that.
Yeah.
Well, it doesn't happen unless you bring people in that are killers, because you can't take someone that's not a killer and make him a killer, right? If they don't have the right attitude, if they're not wired that way. So you got to bring in someone, like maybe they don't have the skill set. You can install the skill set. That's not a problem.
Mm-hmm.
But if they don't have the character and the drive, then they can't possibly level up. And again, one of the things you see all the time is if you're an A player and you have a team full of A players and you bring in one C player, it's done, right? They're going to see that you tolerate mediocrity. And now one of two things is going to happen. Either they're going to level down or they're going to leave. They're not going to be okay with a C player eating at the same table as them, right? They want to ideally maintain this culture and intimidate that guy out, or they're going to call you out as a leader for letting this happen, or they're going to say, hey, this place used to be a good company. Maybe it's time for me to move on.
So Steve, so this is great. It goes down to indicators, right? It comes down to that. Indicators. Like you as the team leader looking for this talent, and you're looking for people that believe in culture and a standard of excellence, and you used a lot of great words that define the type of A player that you're looking for. Mm-hmm. I know you'll dive into it in a little bit with the different kinds of tests that you can use, but how are you as that team leader identifying that person's a killer? They've got that killer instinct, that type A that can really take a hold, that can level up the whole team. Because like you just said, either the team's going to get in a lower state or they're going to leave, or maybe you bring that A player in and they all level up together.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, so we'll talk about assessments in just a second. Before we do that, I'm going to share like an embarrassing story. I was recruiting this guy. I was so looking forward to this guy. Meeting this guy, bringing him to my organization. Because the guy is successful and he's done some stuff that's worthy of attention. So I was looking forward to meeting this guy. I go to this event that he was at, and the person holding the event made sure I got a chance to talk to him. Really nice of them, right? So I talked to him. I was looking forward to it. And, I get in the car afterwards with my wife. And my wife says, hey, you were looking forward to meeting so-and-so. How did it go? And my first answers to her, the first words in my mouth was, he's soft. And my wife's like, what does that mean? I was like, he's soft. And she says, what are you talking about? I said, when things get hard, that guy's going to crack under pressure. Like that is just something instinctive that I can sense, right? I think comes from sports, playing a lot of sports. I think it's just one of those things as a business owner, you kind of get a feel, like in school, there were kids that got bullied. Why did they get bullied? Because they didn't stand up to getting bullied, right? And so I just had this vibe about him. And so I shared that with my wife. She's like, I don't know what's wrong with you. I don't know who I married, but this is weird, right? So, but going back to assessments, I think that's a big, big thing. We use predictive index. I don't want to run a formal interview with you until you've done predictive index. I think that's huge, right? Because I'm about to spend a 90-minute interview with you. I don't want to do a 90-minute interview with you if right off the bat, you don't have the right PI. So step one, we do a screening. We send you a predictive index. And after that, I will run a Who interview. There's a book called it's Who by Jeff Smart. I'm going to run an interview. And look, I just hired someone that was a big deal beginning of the year. And I had 3 different people I interviewed. And 4 interviews. Each of the interviews was 90 minutes.
Wow.
Right? Because this is an important position, right? This is operations from our organization. 90 minutes for 4 different people. I'm not going to spend 90 minutes with you if you're not wired the right way. So I got to make sure you're wired the right way. Then I'll do the 90-minute interview. And then after the 90-minute interview, I'm going to do the reference check. I'm going to call the people that you worked for and get an opinion from them. So that's how, what I was saying earlier with Steve Jobs, his number one responsibility is bringing in great talent and then B, keeping them.
Right.
Part of that, what was implied there is we got to keep the trash out. We cannot let the trash in, right? Like we got to protect, what was it? Protect this court. What is it?
Protect the house.
Protect the house. There you go. We got to protect the house, right? So we do that by making sure the right people get in and the wrong people stay out. And there's a great quote I love from Jack Welch, right? The one rule that never changes is that the team with the best players win. That rule will never change.
Amazing. And I know there were a couple other assessments that you had mentioned too on the call that could be really helpful, because maybe you went over it, but I remember there were like,
so there was a bunch of tests. So I shared all the ones I've taken.
Yeah.
Right. Because I've taken a bunch of tests, right? There's Team Architects, Steve Richards, that's an incredible test. Working Genius, something I've started using. I'm not gonna bring you on. I'm not gonna make you a formal job offer until you take Working Genius. But there's Colbier, there's Enneagram, there's Meyer-Briggs, there's Strength Finder. So there's a lot of different tests out there. But for me, I'm not going to even interview you until you take the predictive index. Again, that's 90 minutes of my time. Now, for other seats in the company, it won't be my time, but it's still 90 minutes of somebody's time, right? And then the Working Genius, that tells me what you like to do. And so for me, bringing in ops, I wanted someone that was galvanizing and tenacious, meaning they're really good at getting people excited about things and also getting stuff done. So if you're excited about getting people to do things and getting stuff done, I need you in operations, right? So, but if you're a salesperson, I want a tenacious person. I want a person that will follow up, until we get a signed contract. That's a tenacious person. So depending on the seat of the company, I want a different Working Genius. But yeah, that was for the operations manager. I was looking for someone with a strong G, strong T, because our greatest challenge in the past has been execution. So I wanted someone that was going to go around and hold everyone accountable nonstop. He just likes having accountability conversations for fun. That's who I wanted to hire.
Interesting. Steve, when you started doing these tests, and let's say when you got the 4 or any other test that you've done, was there a certain result that you saw over and over, like with those people? Was it just all over the board?
Yeah, I think the thing for me is we're small businesses, right? And as a small business, I can't sit here and answer all your questions. So the things I need from you, right? If I'm hiring Al, the things I require is I need someone that is it's got a strong ego, not a big ego. It's got a strong ego. I need someone that's resourceful and someone that can make decisions and get things done, right? Those are the things I require because I run a small business. I don't run a big company, right? I'm not Intel. I'm not Amazon, Facebook, Google. I'm not a big company. There's literally like 6 or 7 people on payroll here. It's a small company. Everyone needs to get their job done, right? And so with that, I'm looking for people that are independent, and that shows up on the predictive index under A, right? So people that are familiar with DISC might think is a D, right? But on the predictive index is an A. And so the A tells me that you're independent. And if you're independent, that means I can give you the parameters for how to get the work done, and then you'll mostly get the work done, right? But if you're collaborative, not to say you can't get the work done, but you might require more clarity, right? You might ask me way too many times, how does this look? How does this look? Hey, where do I get this? Where do I get that? You're asking for too much input from me, and I can't have that in a small company, right? There's times for it, but like not all the time, right? Other things, if I'm looking for certain roles like salespeople, I don't want a detail-oriented person. So every sales role, if they're detail-oriented, I won't bring them in for an interview. Because if you're really good and detailed, like you take really good notes in the CRM, probably not a good salesperson. So like if you're a detailed person and organized, I probably won't interview you for a sales role. It's just not going to be a good fit. I want someone that's sloppy and is kind of a gunslinger like Brett Favre.
Right.
That's who I want in the sales seat. And someone else can go clean up the mess. And now with AI can clean up that mess, right? I don't want a really organized person. So I look at all these things, but for me, the most important thing in my organization as a whole is a high A, because again, you're independent, which means that you can deal with rejection. You like to solve problems. You're resourceful. You get things done. That's what we need in a small company.
If you missed any of that analysis that Steve just went through, you got to rewind just that part, because going through those tests and the different kinds of tests could really help build out a better sales team for you, better team, period, and help your business.
I mean, think about it, right? Like, would you want to hire someone that is 5'9" for the center position for your basketball team? No. Why would you put him there? So then why would we hire someone who's a better fit for an accountant to be on your sales floor?
Yeah.
Right?
Yeah.
You wouldn't do it, but just because you can't see it doesn't mean it's real. Like with sports, it's easy. You can see, right? Does that guy run a 4.2 40 or does he run a 4.8 40? Because depending on that, we're going to see where he's going to be on the football field, right?
Right.
Are they a good shooter? Are they not a good shooter? Again, depending on that, we'll see where we're going to put them on the basketball court. The things we're talking about with these assessments, these are intangibles. You can't see it. But just because you can't see it doesn't mean it's not real.
And then what are some of the kinds of things that you're asking for that in-person interview? Because if you've done all the tests that kind of show you all the indicators, then what's really left to ask them? Is it just to actually have that one meeting that just lasts, like reaffirmed, I knew it, I got it, like this is it? Like what is going on in that one?
I want to know who you are, because the assessment tells us a story, tells us how you're wired. But I want to know who you are, because the assessments can't tell me how long you're willing to go at something until you give up. It can't tell me if you solved really difficult challenges. It can't tell me that you grew up with a single mom and you were able to make it out of a bad area and put yourself through college and took care of some younger siblings, right? That's character. You can't find that in an assessment. So I want to hear adversities you've gone through and how you overcame and persevered. And I also want to know what your core values are. And the simplest way for me to hear your core values is like, hey, Al, tell me about 3 people you look up to. And you give me the names. Okay, what about them do you look up to them about? And whatever they describe, these are going to give me an idea what your core values are. And another question I'm going to ask, like, hey, Al, tell me about your best friend. And you're going to start describing your best friend. And what do we know? Birds of a feather flock together. You're going to be describing yourself. You just don't know you're describing yourself, right? And so, again, when we run these interviews, I'm trying to get an idea, kind of like just fill in the gaps, give us the subjective that fits in with the objective data, mostly objective data from the assessments.
Interesting. Very, very unique approach to this whole process, because I don't know if people are really dialing in their intake and interview process like this.
Well, but think about like how many people you've hired that didn't fit, right? Like how much money have you lost? How much time? How much money have you lost on the individual? Not to mention the opportunity cost, right? And then if you think about like your organization, there are people that are still with you over some period of time, right? Can you imagine if everyone you hired was still with you, how well you would click, right? You look at like, the Denver Nuggets, when they won their championship, everyone knew what everyone else was doing, right? The New England Patriots, their dynasty, everyone knew where everyone else was going to be. There was not very much miscommunication, right?
Right.
Then you take the dream team for the Olympics, and they're terrible. They're awful. Everyone wants to be a slasher. Nobody can shoot. I'm talking about the older dream team, right? I don't know what the newer ones are doing, but the old ones, right? They're slashers. They want to handle the ball. They want to be the star, right? Everyone on the team is a star. It doesn't work, right? So we need to make sure that the chemistry here, we can't have chemistry if we're having this constant turnover. So we got to hire the right people, make sure they're a fit, and as much of a fit as possible. And look, everything I'm talking about right now, I learned like 70% of it, 60% of it years ago, right? Maybe 8-10 years ago, but I didn't think it was a big deal. Knowing what I know now, massive regret in not executing these things I'm talking about today.
Yeah. And I'm sure so many people are thinking probably the same thing about, I need to implement this now, and this is the time to do it. Steve, it's one thing now that you started acquiring the team and everybody's now in office or however you have your setup. But now you want to like really start building that camaraderie, that team culture with everybody. Are you guys doing any sort of team meetings and engagements and contests to like keep the team motivated and keep everybody like, let's do a quarterly contest. Whoever gets to this dollar amount first, like, are you guys doing those kind of incentivized engagements for sales?
We probably should. We don't. We probably should. That could probably be our next gap. What I can share is, we recently started, we incorporated our company, right? We did that end of last year. We incorporated our company because we have a plan to potentially exit at some point. And a part of that, we needed to get, we now have stock options. And so the incentive here for performance is like, you could be part of a company that if we make it big, right? We're not going to be like the janitor at Microsoft, right? Who's like a multimillionaire. We're not going to have that story, or Apple, right? But, like I've said, I'm on a mission to create 100 millionaires. And that's legitimate. Like I want to create wealth within the organization. I had a one-on-one literally right before this podcast. And he's at a crossroads because he's got a job offer somewhere else that can pay him more. And he's worth it. The guy's good. Right. And what he said was the reason why I'm not taking that offer is because I genuinely believe I will be a millionaire if I stay here and work with you.
Wow. So, it translates.
Is that?
Yeah. And it's hard to find people that believe in that and that have that willingness to want to stick around and do that. Well, that's great. Well, this has been huge, Steve. I didn't even know some of these things going into this. And like I said, I learned so much from the family call that it really stuck with me, so that we're now implementing those kinds of things in our business. I'm not even doing sales. We don't even have a sales team, but really everything is sales, right? Getting business is sales. Any final tips on building that sales team that you have for people out there that you'd say this is really important for you to know?
I wouldn't say necessarily important for you to know. I would say important for you to do. Something we've done. So we have our own sales management training. Something that we've done recently is that everything is automated, because people treat recruiting like it's just like this thing that you kind of do, right? But it's not this thing you kind of do. You got to treat it as serious as you treat buying a house. And so like I've set up my CRM now so that when someone applies, all the automations, the drips, they all occur, right? So you apply to work in my company right off the bat. You become an opportunity in the CRM. You're getting an email to take predictive index, and you're getting. Someone told me about this because I was coaching her up, and she was like, "I tested. She opted into our system, and she's like, I got a text from you every single day to take the PI test." Right? She just wanted to see how long it would go. It's still going.
Wow.
Right? So we have, like applied, took the test, right? And it's all automated, right? So it took the test, screening scheduled, and then as a screening schedule, at any point they could be off ramped, right? To like, not hiring. But we got screening, first interview, second interview, and then onboarding. And for onboarding, once you go in the onboarding bucket, offer. So we have pipelines, right? So we have offer, and for the offer, we have everything in the CRM, like the terms of the employment. So it just spits them off an employment contract, all within the CRM. And then after the employment contract, after they sign that, then we move into onboarding. And once we put in onboarding, now they get all the modules because everything's inside the CRM, right? We just go high level. Everything's in there, and now they have access to all the onboarding courses, right? All my sales training. Here's all the things you need to know, books you need to read, all of that, and then we test them. So like, hey, you're supposed to read these books. You're supposed to understand how to use, and this sounds ridiculous, right? But you need to know how to use Gmail, Google Calendar, DocuSign, right? So we tell you what you need to do, and then you have to pass the quiz to unlock the next module. So like that all goes into now, this is a real business.
Right.
This is a real company. You're going to get the experience versus what I used to do, right? Hey, Al's starting on Monday. Hey, someone go get a computer and set up a Gmail for him, right?
Yeah.
So we used to do. That's not our company anymore.
Yeah, it's definitely evolved over time for sure. And you got to
Yeah.
know those kinds of things. I mean, those are essential skills. I mean, I'm thinking even as the owner of the company, you need to know how to use those and how to implement those. You can't just pass that off to people. Steve, awesome stuff. Great advice. Great masterclass on really this basic building blocks to how you can do this, and advanced stuff as well on how everybody that is doing this in real estate or business can implement this for their sales team and their sales process. I can think of a handful of teams, Steve, that I know that listen to this podcast that are going to be listening and text me and go, wow, we're doing this like now. Like anybody that comes in after, we're doing this now. And that's the kind of actionable items that we love when guests come on the show. So thanks for providing that kind of stuff. It's great.
Thank you for giving me a platform to share.
For sure. Steve, I do a segment called Signature Questions towards the end of my show. And I just got a couple for you. You know, when you're first starting out, you always remember some of that advice that somebody once gave you when the younger version of Steve, and it sticks with you to this day. What would you say is some of the best advice somebody ever gave you when getting into real estate or business?
So this was advice that was given to me when I was 8 years old. So this is not going to be earth-shattering advice. It's not going to be that profound. But I still remember it. So when I was a kid, my parents had a restaurant. It failed. Didn't go anywhere. We had a guy who founded, created, and owned the largest hard money company in Phoenix, Arizona. Right. And for whatever reason, he liked my parents. And so we became friends. We, spent time together. I still remember when we went to his house one time, and then he showed us his guest house. And I asked my parents, like, why is his guest house bigger than our house? Right. But I still remember as an 8-year-old, I thought I was so smart. I was like, oh, the secret is not to work hard. The secret is to work smart. Right. Like I thought I was this profound kid, 8 years old. And he pulls me aside. He's like, he puts his hand on my shoulder, like, Steve, no, that's not it. You got to work hard and you got to work smart. Right. This idea that we can just jump into business and everything's going to be smooth, because some of us think this, right? It's going to be hard. You're going to eat a lot of crap sandwiches. You can get bloodied. You're going to have sleepless nights. You're going to maybe lose your hair. Your hair might go gray. You're going to throw around the D word if you're married. It's going to suck a lot. But if you put your head down, you get to work, you work smarter, you work harder, it'll all work out.
Boom. Great story. I mean,
yeah,
you gotta do it. You absolutely got to do it. Steve, a lot of times we face difficult challenges in our business. And I know we've had a lot of guests that have shared that on the show. What are some of the biggest challenges you face in your industry?
The biggest challenge I made was really just believing my own BS, right? It's just thinking I'm this awesome guy who's got it all figured out. And so I heard a phrase recently, hammer of humility. I thought that was great, right? We all get hit with the hammer of humility. So in 2021, everything is going great. And so I've got the space I'm in right now, but we expanded the space. We absorbed our next door neighbor, right? So we doubled the size of the suite. I hired all these people. We had a payroll we had 7 guys in the media team alone. And so what I ended up doing was committing to all these obligations and responsibilities that when the market when the market had a hard break in June of 22, not only did wholesaling get harder in Phoenix, because everyone's underwriting guidelines changed, right? Everyone's underwriting guidelines dropped 25%, which I get, right? But that's my real estate business. And on top of that, I'm a service provider. And so my service provider is to other real estate people who are also going through hard times. So I've got this massive overhead, and right off the bat, my wholesaling business comes to a complete stop, and my sales training organization stops to about 50%. So guess what doesn't change? Your overhead. So the hardest things believing your own BS because you put yourself in a position where you're going to, again, sleepless nights, difficult conversations, right? So yeah, I would say the greatest challenges are the ones that I put myself in those spots.
And getting out of your own way.
Yeah.
Yeah. Great. Love it. Steve, a lot of us are always looking for mentors, right? Or we go to mentors when we need advice or something to lean on and get feedback on. Who do you go to for mentorship?
It's a fantastic question. Someone asked me this the other day, and I felt kind of like a douchebag when I answered it, but I'm going to give the same answer. I've been incredibly blessed in my life where every challenge I have, there's probably a person in my life, a different person in my life that can answer that question. So if it's a financial question, maybe I call David Richter or Marcus Krigler. If I have a leadership problem, maybe I call Eric Brewer or Stephanie Betters. If I have a marketing problem or a personnel problem, maybe I call Phil Green. Like, I have all these other people I can call. So I don't have one person because I've been incredibly blessed to have, this incredible Rolodex.
Yeah. It's almost like having experts, right? They're the experts in their field. And so it's not
cheat code. Yeah.
It's not just one person, but all these people that are a master or skillful at what they do in their world. That's really cool. Well, and those are great people to lean on. You named so many people that are great people to lean on for items like that.
Yeah.
Awesome. Steve, last signature question. Who has a better podcast, Steve Trang or RJ Bates?
I mean, is RJ still podcasting?
Yeah, he's still podcasting. He's
I had no idea. Sorry. Couldn't tell.
I hope he watches this. This would be great. Because
I think I'm not sure. I think he says he's still podcasting. It's hard to say for sure.
Yeah, he's got a podcast out there, but I know you have a great podcast with Real Estate Disruptors. And if anybody hasn't heard Steve's podcast and had seen the guests that have been on his podcast, you got to go check it out. Steve's been doing that podcast, what now, for 7-8 years?
7 years. It'll be 7 years in May.
Wow. I mean, deep. Yeah. I mean, and it takes a lot of work. It's a lot of work to do the podcast, but some of the biggest names in the industry, you got to check that out. Real Estate Disruptors. Steve, this has been a lot of fun. I always learn from you. I always learn different things and so many action items that people can take now and implement in their business, which is really key for having any guests on our show. It's the value that you provide. And we've made sure to drop your chyrons to your YouTube channel, to find your podcast and how to close more sales, because that's the idea. If you want to get in touch with Steve, keep watching the chyrons on the bottom, and this is going to be the information to get you to Steve. You want to get in touch with him so you can learn more about this kind of stuff. Steve, it's been a lot of fun. I do this segment, final words, final thoughts, that last piece of advice for everybody. Final words, final thoughts, Steve Trang.
It's the same always. I still believe this. I say this as an immigrant. We live in the greatest country and this greatest time to ever be alive. So why not you?
We'll leave it right there. Steve, you're the man. Thanks so much for being on the Al Nicoletti Show and taking the time to carve out to give this value back to our guests. I really appreciate it. I'll see you soon at Family.
Thank you. See you soon.
All right. Take care, Steve. Wow. Epic episode on building that sales team. So I took so many notes. I know a lot of people, and I know Mike was taking notes backstage. I mean, a lot of people need to hear this information. If you are running that team, if you have a business, real estate, this is the kind of episode that you need to listen to so you can implement this stuff to build those A players today, right? Build out those processes, implement some of these tests, understand like what you're really asking for in the process of hiring, and you want to build that A team. So go back, watch it, check it out. If you missed any of it, you know where to find us. Scan the QR code on the bottom of the screen. You'll find all of our content, and tune in next Wednesday at 9 p.m. Eastern for another banger of an episode. We'll see you then. Have a great night, everybody. Take care.